All right, welcome back to day 2 of our distance learning. We're going to cover section 6.2 today, Properties of Parallelograms. Hopefully everything went well with 6.1. Hopefully this works well as long as you have your book out, ready to look in and pay attention to. You should be able to follow along in the book pretty easily. You can always pause the video anytime, go back and re-watch it, or read the book first even. That might even help when talking about these sections. All right, so first of all, we're going to talk about what a parallelogram is. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. Okay, so right here, the definition of a parallelogram, very important to know, so please pay attention to that. It's a quadrilateral, so four-sided figure that with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. So basically here's a parallelogram here because both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. Now, that is the definition. The first theorem says that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So if you know it's a parallelogram, then you know that both pairs of opposite sides are also congruent. So not only in a parallelogram, you have both opposite sides parallel, those are little arrows. You also know that opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so that's what the first theorem says. If you know it's a parallelogram, you know these two things. Okay, here is an example. It says FGHJ. This time they labeled it in counterclockwise. That's fine as long as it's consecutive. It says that it is a parallelogram. Since it is a parallelogram, JH, remember without the segment sign it means measure, equals, since JH is opposite GJ or FG, and FG is 5, and they are congruent, then JH also has to be 5. FJ is opposite JG, and they are also congruent, so FJ has to be 3. Okay, remember the opposite sides are congruent, so you're using that just to be able to know what the other sides are. Okay, so here again, pause your video and quickly do this, and then restart the video and we'll go over it. Okay, so it's asking for AB. AB is opposite DC, so AB is also 9. AD is opposite BC, so AD is also 8. Okay, here's the next two theorems. The next two theorems say that when you have a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, so you already know it's a parallelogram, then you can conclude that the opposite angles are also congruent. So not only are the opposite sides congruent, the opposite angles are also congruent. Theorem 6.4 says if you have a parallelogram, then the consecutive angles are supplementary. So not only are the opposite angles congruent, but the consecutive angles, x plus y, are supplementary. They add up to 180 degrees. Okay, a little bit of proof why that is. They have it up here. If you have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, the same side interior angles, remember, are supplementary. And so it's the same idea. We have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, so they are same side interior angles and supplementary. Okay, so with this said, find the missing angle measures. We know that angle P is 70. Well, if all we know is one angle, we know the other three. Okay, so we know that the one opposite it is also 70. The ones that are consecutive are supplementary with it, so it has to be 110. Okay, so consecutive angles are supplementary, they add up to 180. Opposite angles are congruent, so that one has to be 70. All right, so let's go ahead and pause your video. Try this. Okay, welcome back. We've got opposite angles are congruent. So that one's 60. Same side interior or consecutive angles are supplementary, so that's 120. And this also is 120. Here, this is 105. This has to be 75. All right, next theorem. Again, you have a parallelogram. When that happens, its diagonals bisect each other. They bisect each other. In other words, they break each other up into two congruent parts. In other words, the midpoint is the intersection of those two diagonals. All right, so it says here in this parallelogram, find Tx. Well, since Vx is 3, Tx is also 3 because they are congruent. Okay, they are congruent. Here are the properties and theorems of a parallelogram. So that's just kind of a overall view of all of those. So anytime that you have a question of how to do a problem, always refer back to this list. The answer's in this list somewhere. Whichever one is going to help you with that situation, that's the one you would use. And that's it for section 6.2. Good luck with your homework. Let me know if you have any questions.